good night, everyone. Tonight, God is good and God is good all the time. My name is Irma J. Spirit Divine, and happy Martin Luther King Day. You know, I hope y'all enjoy yourself. We celebrating Martin Luther King, and we put my other set of eyes on. Okay, we're celebrating. His birthday was yesterday, but we're celebrating his day today. Civil rights. He was a leader, Martin Luther King Jr. So when we hear his name, we must often think of his legendary speech. We ain't gonna never forget his speech. You know, uh, I have a dream. The civil rights movement, and sadly, his assassination. Martin Luther King represent black culture, and nonviolent. He played a key role in the American civil rights movement from 1950 to 1968, until his assassination. That, he dealt with human rights for African American, economical disadvantage, and all victims of injustice through peaceful protests. He always did protests, and he always like a nonviolent protest. So Martin Luther King Jr., he was born January 15, 1929. He was born and lived in Atlanta, Georgia. Martin Luther King was assassinated April 4th, 1968. Martin Luther King, he studied at Boston University, Montgomery, Alabama, where he met Coretta Scott, and she was studying music while she was there. So Martin Luther King then married Coretta Scott, and they had 4 children together. In 1953, when Martin Luther King moved to Montgomery, Alabama, he became to be a pastor, at Dessa Avenue Baptist Church. Black Power movement started, when Martin represented black culture. So when the slave had ended, that's when that's when Martin Luther King was born. So when the slave had ended, we thought, we was free, but still, it's a lot of things we could not do. You know, we could not vote. We could not sit in front of the bus. It was a lot of things we still couldn't do. We couldn't drink in certain waters that everybody else, so we wasn't fully free from bondage. We was free from slave, but it still felt like we was in bondage, until Martin Luther King came along. He opened doors for a lot of us, for all of us, you know. Um, he wanted to make changes in the world, for equal rights. You know, um, he perceived a peace protest, no violence. African American could not vote. Martin changed, the king changed that rule. And now we can vote. We have the right to vote. And a lot of us still don't vote. He opened doors for that. Too. African American could not sit in front of the bus. And we see that King boycott that route. So now we can sit anywhere we want on the bus. But some of us still get on the bus to go all the way to the back. He opened doors for a whole lot of stuff for us that we could not do. You know, um, so Martin, he protests for equal rights. Equal rights. He made sure he wanted the whole world of African Americans to have equal rights because we never had equal rights. So he made sure that it was his mission to make sure we have equal rights. You know, black sanitation worker. You know, what led to his assassination. That was his last project he did in 1968. What led to his death. It was the last project he did. Because the workers, they wasn't working in a good environment. You know, they wanted a raise. You know, and it was just a whole and then they and then it was a whole lot. It wasn't working condition. But when 2 workers had got killed on the job, that's when they started the protest. That's when they start to strike. So Martin role in the bus boycott transformed him into a national public figure, and the best known spokesman of civil rights movement. So Martin the King, he had a dream, had become a legendary speech. We ain't gonna never forget that statement he always made. I have a dream, you know. Um, and it was more than just a speech. King had a dream that someday, it will become a reality. That he pushed to the end and hoped to create a world where people were seen as people and not color. That was what they was born with. Because God created all of us. God created all different colors, all different shapes, But Martin, the king, he wanted everyone to look at everyone as people, not color. So King, he inspired a nation. That's why if you saw the movie, he was like, why y'all pick me? Because they pick him to do all this. I just saw it yesterday. They pick him to do this. And he asked why y'all pick me. He would say, when you speak, people move. Because sometimes people can be a good speaker. They can swing out words. And people will listen. People listen when he had when he spoke. So they had picked him. He was a good speaker. You know, he was a good speaker, and and everyone saw how people listen when he speak. So he wouldn't be able to change the world on his own. But this word spoke inside the heart of every person. At the time. He said when he spoke, it touched a lot of people's heart at that time. Waiting for the right moment to make a difference. That's all he wanted to do, to make a difference. Cause we didn't have rights for anything. We had civil rights for anything until Martin Luther King came along and broke a lot of rules. He opened doors for us for a whole lot of things. So as a leader that he was, he inspired so many people, but he also was hated, you know, but he still fight for equal rights for all, all across the nation. Even though, it had so many people love him, but they also had so many people hating him. Not just on the whites, they had some black people hating him too. And he was making a difference for the world, for everyone, every color or anyone that had any kind of issue, he was dealing with it. But you can't please everyone, because they had some people hating him, but he also was loved by so many people. So now we're gonna talk about the story what led to his assassination. You know, Martin Luther King. February 12th, 1968, Martin took on 1,300 black sanitation workers. So this strike here started in February. So I mean, it led on for 2 months before he got killed. He got killed in April the 4th, 1968. And this February the 12th, 1968. So they came to him, because the workers wasn't having equal rights on the job. So this person, Lawrence, he was a good friend of Martin. He the one came to Martin about this project, about the workers, complaining about they're not working in a good condition, they're not getting paid enough. What they was getting paid was so low, but they had to still apply for welfare and food stamps. So he took on 1,300 black sanitation workers in Memphis, begin a strike to demand better working condition and higher pay rates. So he said, I am a man. Now the workers in Memphis saw finance, justice in a strike that faithfully became Martin Luther King Jr. final cause. This was his last project. You know, sanitation workers, they plead for hauling trash sometime in pouring rain. When you're dealing with the hauling with the trash out there, you had to deal with that in the cold, the rain, and everything else. And sometimes it went over their time limit, but they were not getting paid for overtime. So it was a dirty job. But yet, the city of Memphis expect garbage collector to work long hours for wages and without overtime pay. So their own wages was 65 cents an hour. Just like it was back then. And this was in the 60s. There was eligible, but the wages was so low, 65 cents an hour was so low that many was eligible for welfare and food stamps. You know, two sanitation workers that sparked the strike. They've been having this problem, but when the two workers on a job site had got killed, that was really sparked them to have the strike. And then it was time for if the job was gonna pay their family for compensation so for some kind of money for their family, they refused, and that's when they went on the strike. So this is really a part of why the strike started. They needed to work in good condition, more wages, and also two workers' death. So they already had the issues, working conditions and the wages. But then when the two workers got killed, that would really spark them to have the strike. So the strike started a couple of weeks before the death of two workers. You know, the workers were dissatisfied, had reached new heights. They was like at the end of their rope. End of their rope. So when two men, two of the workers, Cole and Robert Walker, were killed while on a job site. So Cole and Walker had taken shelter from the rain. See, they was working and then it was raining. So they tried to take shelter to get out of the rain. And they went in the back of the truck when it malfunctioned, and both men were crushed to death. Crushed to death. That was one of the garbage trucks, and they sit on the back of it trying to get shelter from the rain. And by the truck wasn't working too good. They say the truck was on function. It was not working too good. You know, so fatal spark outraged workers that had been lobbied the city in vain for properly functioning equipment. So that mean poorly functions. I mean it been like that for a while, but they never fix it. So when the city did refuse to provide any kind of money for the deceased workers, family, you know, for their family, if they love wives behind, children behind, they're supposed to give them something to get them going, but they refuse to give them anything. And so a lot of workers had walked off the job and it was disgusting. Until Memphis, both the NAACP and King had focused mainly on racial equality. The sanitation workers' strike was a vanity for workers' rights. NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, civil rights organization, that was started like in 1909. So this was part of a large thread of time that class had always been an issue in the civil rights movement. But in the late 60s, it was having to deal, they had to deal with. They've been having issues, but they had to deal with. Until they heard about Martin Luther King came along. According to the King, the strike kicked off successfully with several hundred of people that had set in, which to led to city council to acknowledge the sanitation workers union and support raises. So they had several hundreds, that sit down at the table, and they were willing to discuss, the condition of the job site and raises and talk to the union. But then they had outside groups came in and started violence and all this kind of stuff, and that's what made and everything out of control. The mayor, however, refused these conditions, and on February 23rd, 1968, the police confronted the peaceful protests with tear gas. Because they had some was violent. They had a group out there was not even supposed to be in Martin Luther King no group. So then Martin Luther King came to Memphis. Martin met with those black leaders that led by Reverend James Lawson formed a condition to support the strike. Lawson had a working relationship with King. So he asked him to march and lead his verse to the struggle. So it was his project. And he came and asked Martin to help him with this project. Help him march, help him with the strike and everything else. Because they know Martin, he speak, and a lot of people listen. So that's why they always wanted Martin to be involved. So this cause was well aligned to King's priority at the time. So 1968, King was building the Poor People campaign to validate, for America's devout races. The sanitation worker movement was one that was about the link between economic injustice and racial injustice, and this was exactly the type of thing that King was working on. Because he worked on special projects. He didn't just work on anything, because he dealt with nonviolence. So when he at that time, he said it was the kind of type of project he had worked on. So on March 28, 1968, King returned to Memphis to lead a march with Lawson in support of the strike. Now the protest turned ugly when an outside group, that's what I was telling you earlier, just an outside group infiltrated the march and became violent, leading to the death of an African American teenager. So that's what everything just went out of rage. This outside group wasn't supposed to be there. Because just like Martin had said, if you saw the movie, he said he had a feeling it was gonna turn that way because the same people that was at the meeting and stuff had violence in them. And that wasn't the people that weren't supposed to be there that really kicked all this violence off where they had a teenager got killed. Despite the tragedy, the strike continued, as did smaller demonstration, protests, march, when, they was wearing the shirts, I am a man. They was wearing the shirts, I am a man, demanding that they be treated with dignity. Because they were just treating them like crap. Treating them like crap. They couldn't talk to the union or none of that, because they work with the union. If you work on certain jobs, you work with the union, and you get somebody to talk to the union about any kind of condition or whatever, but they never wanted to hear anything they had to say. So the sign said, crying out for the movement. So King delivered, I've been to the mountaintop. Now, this was his last speech. I've been to the mountaintop, because he's been doing this for a long time. He opened so many doors, so he started seeing his last days. He at that point, the rest started coming in, so he just started thinking about his dad, and he said his last speech, I've been to the mountaintop, meaning he did everything he can on this earth. He opened doors for so many roofs that was closed that he opened. So this was his last speech. He did all that he wanted to do on this earth. He went across the nation, to help color for civil rights. Because we did not have civil rights at all. We did not have rights at all. Martin Luther King, he was born right after the slave had ended. But a lot of colors still felt like they was in bondage. Until Martin Luther King came along. His father, he was ministry first. But he didn't spoke people the way that Martin did. He was a good. His dad was a good reverend. He was good. He was a good reverend. Remember, just like it says, certain people can speak and touch so many people. And he touched so many people. He opened so many doors. He was a good preacher. He spoke that word and people just listen. Just like he had that, just like the whole lot of people was like, it was in Memphis, doing violence and hooping and hiding and cut up, and nobody couldn't stop them people. Nobody couldn't shut them down. That's why they told Martin, Martin, why don't you go out there and calm these people down? So he went out there and told them, y'all put all the weapon down. Put the weapon down. If y'all want to follow me, put the weapons down. And they put the weapons down and they walk away. They listen. So Martin Luther King was a good leader. When he spoke, they listened. So this was his last speech. He did all that he wanted to do on earth. He went across the nations to help color for civil rights. King renounced the violence from March the 28th protests, but many of his critics still blame him for it. A black African teenager, got killed. They blame Martin for it. They blame him for it because the group that causes the violence was not supposed to be in Martin Luther King group. But they still, no matter how he tried to plead or what happened, they still blame him for it. So April the 3rd, 1968, it was the day before he got killed. King returned to Memphis and he delivered his last speech, which foreshadowed to his death. So when King got to Memphis, that was a threat. Was saying what they were out. He didn't know what would happen to him. Then the king got depressed. He started thinking about his own death. And the death threat was coming every day, all day long, every day. So April the 4th, 1968, King was fatally shot at Lorraine Motel in Memphis. So King, as all-American hero. Now, all the people say he was an all-American hero, because he went all across the nation helping people to open doors for civil rights. He was loved, and he also was hated by white and black. They had some black people hated him too. So King assassination brought deep mourning and civil unrest, to city around the country. In Memphis, the sanitation workers struggle, continue with the added support of the widow Coretta Scott. Now she took over, because when he passed, there still was going on with the strike. So Coretta had them on and everything, but she still went to Memphis and helped them out with the strike. A few days after King assassination, she and other leaders returned to Memphis Street to support the workers. So she went to Memphis and she went and support the workers because they kept the strike going. So all the hard work that Martin Luther King did, even after that, the effort finally paid off. The President Lincoln Johnson sent James Reynolds, his undersecretary of labor, to Memphis to help resolve the strike. So he sent someone, secretary, to help to solve the strike. So they're ready to solve the strike, And so Martin Luther King, he did all that hard work, and then after that, they're ready to solve, the strike. Nearly 2 weeks later, April 16, 1968, the city agreed to grant raises to African American employees and recognize the workers' union. So this all Martin Luther King was trying to do. This all he wanted to do. It did not happen, while he was on this earth. They waited 2 weeks later after he was gone, and then they agreed and give all these complaints came. They resolved all the stuff that Martin Luther King was trying to do. Martin Luther King, known for 2 legendary speech. I have a dream. I've been to the mountaintop. So we see after his death, 2 weeks later, they agree and grant raises and then recognize the workers' unit. And that's all Marjorie was trying to do. Give them rights, give them civil rights on the job site. So that all what King was aiming for, justice and rights. So King was a hero, and we all have to recognize, and just like they gave him a hard time, that's all they had to do while he was alive. Agree and sit down. Let's discuss these issues that he's working is having. And so right now, I'm telling everyone, we have to recognize great leaders. Not wait till they're dead and gone. We have to recognize great leaders now. Not wait till they're gone and buying all their shirts and buying all their products and stuff. We need to recognize leaders, good leaders, good people. We got to recognize them now. Support people now. So while he was alive, to get a man a hard time. He went to all kind of bumpy roads, all kind of bumpy roads to open doors. And then a door opened right after his death, 2 weeks after his death. And then you had some black people hating him. And he was helping all colored people for rights. So many people, so we also see that King was loved by so many people. But we also see that white and black hated him. Also, so Martin Luther King opened doors for us. Doors when we came along would have been still closed. So Martin Luther King Day is today. A day for remembrance. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is a federal holiday in the United States, celebrating every year on the third Monday of January. To honor the life and the legend of civil rights leader, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Celebrate life of a man who brought hope and healing, justice and right, to America. He wanted all of us to have equal rights. He wanted everyone in the world to look at us as people and not as color. He opened doors for that. It won't be for him pushing, knocking doors down for us. We still won't be able to vote. We still won't be able to sit in front of the bus. We still won't be able to drink certain water, our water fountain that's out. He opened doors for so many issues, so many doors that were closed for us. And that was right after slavery ended. And that's when he was born. And he just thought, they chose him. He didn't chose to do that. He chose to be a pastor, a minister. They chose him. They picked him to be this national public figure. That's what he became, especially when he broadcast and broke that rule. He broke the chain on that. He broke the snare of that. People was going to jail because they didn't want to get up from the bus. And they was going to jail. This lady here, Rosie Parks, she refused to give up her seat. She said, I just got up from work. I'm tired. Why should I have to get up? And when she refused to get up, she had to go to jail. And Martin Luther King said, no, that's not right. He saw a lot of stuff was not right. And that's when he just started jumping at, being a leader that he was. So that's all I have on Martin Luther King for today. He was a great leader, and what he lost his death that year and what he was fighting for came to pass 2 weeks later after his death. They give those workers wages, raises, and they recognize their unit. And that's what he was fighting for. So they got justice. What the strike was about, they got justice. They got everything they had marched for. So y'all have a blessed night. You know, and I see y'all on the next video.